Hi, this is Artie from Bar Mills, and as promised, we are going to discuss, in addition to the written instructions that came with the Cundy Village kit, some aspects of the entire diorama. This is it in front of us, in front of me anyhow, and in front of you, I guess. And it's the entire 22 by 22, roughly, surface area of Cundy Village, anything from the foreground buildings to the hotel in the background. Now, we're not going to try to get very, very specific on building techniques here. This is more about introducing you to our concept, our diorama, the way we did it, and how we got to where this is currently right now as you see it. The idea here is to give you some insight as to how we approached building the diorama, not so much the specific kits. First of all, understand that my very good friend and one of the most important people in Bar Mills is Jim Mooney, who's not here right now, but he's our engineer, and his work is primarily responsible for almost everything you see here. I had an idea of doing a village some time ago. Jim picked up on it and stayed with it, and he worked his butt off to try to use something unique, and this is what we came up with. And we're going to now discuss how we built this thing as you see it. The entire diorama is built on something called Gator Foam. Gator Foam is not foam core. It's not what you think it is. It's not the stuff you see in AC Moore. Gator Foam is a commercial product put out by 3M, Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing, that I was first turned on to when Nancy and myself owned sign shops. We've been using this for 15 years. Now, make no mistake about it, a lot of other manufacturers and diorama builders have picked up on this product. But in all honesty, we can say we, in many ways, pioneered the use of this particular product in model railroading. The question is, where do you get the Gator Foam? Two things. Number one, I prefer the Gator Foam in black. It does come in white, and it does come in various thicknesses. So if you want a thinner Gator Foam, you can get it. If you want a thicker one, you can get it as well. We use 1/2 inch thick black Gator Foam. This is the standard for Bar Mills dioramas. Now, I've written, excuse me, I've written down this contact information. There's a fellow named Dave Myers that does go to train shows, and Dave's number is 802-244-1471. Dave is about the best, easily, reliably available source for Gator Foam without going to a place where you have to buy a 4x8 sheet and have to have it shipped in special via some kind of a big tractor-trailer truck to your home. Another question that we get asked very often is, what about the vehicles that we use? Well, the vehicles are basically custom-made for us by a fellow named Mike Fuller. Now, Mike lives upstate New York in the Syracuse area, and his number is 315-451-0575. Mike's a great guy. He does custom work. He does it in a bunch of different scales. And while we are a little bit hesitant about giving out his contact information, this is what Mike does these days as he's retired. So you might want to give Mike a call if you are in need of really high quality vehicles with some really cool attitudes about them. One other thing too. Now, our water, there's so many different ways of doing water, and I've been turned on to a couple of them that frankly I think fell very flat. I do go back to my original way of doing water, whether it's on our SN2 layout or on the Niagara and Pearl Creek N-scale layout, or in this case on this Cundy Village diorama. We use something called Envirotex, which is a 2-part epoxy resin. Now, the thing of it is this stuff is very, very fussy. It has to be mixed exactly 50-50 and stirred very well. And if doing it isn't frightening enough, you ought to see the price. There's a secret though. We live in an area that we happen to have a store called AC Moore available. Now, AC Moore is a national chain. A lot of you folks do have it available. And AC Moore is known for putting out 40% discount coupons. I always use a 40% discount coupon when going to AC Moore, where I can buy Envirotex. It's a great way to save a lot of money. It's not something you would normally ever see for sale in a hobby shop or through a mail order catalog. So keep in mind AC Moore, Envirotex 2-part epoxy resin, and you'll have what you need exactly to do your waterfronts for your own dioramas or model railroad. We actually have a CAD drawing of the footprint of this diorama drawn and in our system here at Bar Mills. If you would like this forwarded to you, let me know, and we'll give you the exact dimension of what we have here and exactly how we place the buildings. Keep in mind that if this did not have to be portable, it would have been made larger. Things like laundry lines at the side of buildings, things like buildings surrounded by Instafence, other details added would have enhanced the scene quite a bit. But we are in a unique position of having to travel with these things. So we do not use that. We are not saying you should not, however. But should you request it, we can give you a PDF drawing, something you'll have to print and kind of tape together to get to be this size, that you can use as a model if you'd like to replicate the diorama as we've done it here. Just so as you know, we'll start at the very beginning. We started with a 22 by 22 inch square of Gator Foam. We actually built it up in not 2 but 3 different layers. The first layer would be considered sea level. We added a 1/2 inch piece on top of it, and that formed the basis for the foreground structures. They're actually 1/2 inch above the sea level. And by the way, they accommodate the seawalls that came with the kit precisely. Sometimes you just get lucky. To build up the hotel and give it more height, we added not 1 but 2 more. Oh, let me take a look. Make that 3 more thicknesses of Gator Foam. I can see the layering in the back of the diorama. So where we went up 1/2 inch to the first level, we added not 1/2 but 1.5 inches to the third level in the back. And this helped give the diorama some height and helped enunciate the fact that we had this great hotel sitting up on this hill, something like, oh, almost an Alfred Hitchcock kind of a thing that may have been done at one point or another. Now, before we continue with any specifics, the trees on this layout are made from sagebrush trunks, and you can get those, for instance, at Scenic Express. But we used Woodland Scenic's fine leaf foliage clusters applied to the sagebrush using Walder's glue or Sobo glue or tacky glue, whatever happens to work for you. So when you see the diorama, while there is actually very little scenery, there are certainly some trees in the back. Sagebrush with not Walder's, Woodland Scenic's fine leaf foliage clusters. We're going to go on to one other thing that I've overlooked here, and that's our figures. There was a time we used to use quite a few figures by Woodland Scenics. We preferred Prizer, but Woodland Scenics came out with a great line of some unique figures that were high quality and very affordable. While things have shifted a little bit again, and while the Woodland Scenics figures have gone up, the Prizer figures have pretty much maintained their original costs, and they were never cheap, but now all of a sudden they don't look so bad. We prefer to use Prizer figures whenever is possible, and that's what you'll see us using on the diorama. Now you understand, just like any other kit manufacturer, things like vehicles and figures don't come with the kits. But this is what we use when we set up a diorama, especially a diorama that is going to be photographed from very close up. And details do count, especially in front of the camera at that kind of a distance. Now, we don't want to get into teaching you how to build every building, because there'll be other clinics that briefly go over that in addition to what you have in your instructional booklet. But there are certain philosophies that we use when we put together a diorama, and that is what this clinic is all about. The most important thing to me when I build something is the color of the structure. We all glue together stairs and add shingles and windows and the rest of it. And yes, sometimes we use alcohol and India ink. Sometimes many of us prefer to use nail holes. It depends what you want to do, but the important thing is keep in mind that once you finish a structure, it'll be next to another structure which will be next to possibly, at least in this case, yet another structure, and that the colors have to work together. If you sit at your desk and you just start painting things up, and you end up with three red structures, and you put them on a diorama, one next to the other, next to the other, you'll see yourself creating a scene that really has very, very little visual interest. The color of every structure in a scene is tightly linked in with the color of every other structure that directly surrounds it. You're looking to achieve an entire appearance, not just a single bright moment, but a combination, a collage of different things that fit together in harmony. And keep in mind also that while many of you do paint kind of vividly on your colors, you don't want to do that. Everything you see on a model, especially HO scale, which is 1 to 87, in real life would be viewed from a pretty good distance. There is something called haze. I know a lot of you are more than familiar with where I'm going with this. The idea is keep your contrast of the colors, keep your color contrast very low, because by keeping it low, you don't have those bright reds or the bright blues or the bright yellows. Everything is muted down a little bit, and everything will make a lot more sense visually if you look at a scene and not as a collage of individual efforts. There's something else to keep in mind when you're building a diorama too. Forced perspective is something we normally see as closer and farther, bigger and smaller. But it works in two directions. There's also lower and upper. And as you go higher, details get smaller because in essence you are going closer and further, but in a different on a different plane. Disney, for instance, if you've been to Disney in Orlando or out in Anaheim, when you go to Main Street in Disney, you may not be aware of it, but the second and third stories of the buildings on Main Street are scaled to 5/8 of what the bottom floors are scaled to. Disney uses forced perspective in real life, where we are walking down the street of what ends up being nothing but a magnificently done full-size model, but not really full-sized because they employ forced perspective. You'll see that the tops of the buildings feature billboards that are somewhat undersized. The whole idea is to give the viewer the impression of something larger than it is. This is important when building a diorama. You're also going to want to use that same feel, that same attitude during the placement of vehicles, during the placement of figures, during the placement of trees, of fences. Use HO fences in the front. Use N-scale fences in the back. Use full-size trees in the front. Use slightly miniaturized versions, probably up on some kind of a hill or a bluff, in the back. Use larger signs in the front, smaller signs in the back, and always smaller signs up on the roof, because in reality, that's the way we perceive them in real life. Now, earlier on, I mentioned keeping the colors muted and the contrasts low when you're placing your buildings and when you're painting actually your structures to form a larger scene. Certain things should be weathered. Buildings certainly do get old after a while, but it doesn't mean they all have to be falling apart. Certain things do not get weathered. Think twice about weathering a vehicle, and never, but ever, weather a scale pedestrian. You know, without the brightness of these individual components, such as vehicles and detail figures, and people on bicycles in this case, everything would look dull, and you need the brightness and the contrast to oppose the lack of contrast in the buildings themselves, to add some vibrancy to your work. Well, we don't want to have this go on too long because there will be other clinics on anything from Albin's Hat Shop to the Cundy Village Hotel, and those are all separate clinics. Of course, they're all free. And remember, any of the approaches we take can be used in any diorama, whether it's one of ours or just something of your own making. Here again, this is Artie Fahey. from Bar Mills, and we appreciate your support, and we will try not to let you down. You're all important to us, and without you, there would be no us, and we know it. Thanks from Bar Mills.